Right. So, friends, welcome to the first of our Sweet Taste of HeartScapes free community class for 2023, January. Really glad to have all of you here. We really love this ongoing community space to dive into the places where the system of Reiki and our daily lives intersect. We let this be really an open space where the topics that we work with are informed by conversations that we have, questions folks ask in classes, and casual conversation on YouTube videos that I put out. And really that come through our day-to-day life, because we believe very strongly that if we can't bring our spiritual practice, whether it's Reiki or anything else, in line with our day-to-day life, with the mundane of the choices and actions that we take every day, then it's of limited value to us. And so we find these opportunities to come together and have these conversations to be very valuable in knitting those things together. In thinking about how we wanted to open this new year in this January class, we wanted to really root back down into some of the foundational perspectives, concepts, worldviews that form the system of Reiki, and kind of get that foundational start. So I'm really glad that that topic spoke to so many of you. My name is Michaela. I am the owner and lead teacher here at HeartScapes Reiki in Davis, California. My co-teacher, Joe G, is on the line waving at you right now. Either one of us can answer any questions that you might have. And please do feel free to use the chat to drop any questions, comments as we go. We really love for this to be an interactive experience. I opened HeartScapes in 2017 when we began teaching, and I've been practicing the system of Reiki for about 9 years, and Joe, about 12 for you now, something like that. Good chunk of time. So in that time, we've had the opportunity to work with just hundreds of folks in a wide variety of capacities, from one-on-one sessions, classes, community gatherings like this, presentations and large events, and work very intimately with over 60 people in classes and more in-depth experiences, including our year-long Reiki training, comprehensive, really deep and spacious dive into the full system of Reiki, well supported in community and in one-on-ones. And that cohort will be beginning again in the middle of this month, along with our Reiki 1 class that will begin January 15th. So if you have any questions about any of that, we'll share a bit more of it at the end. Joe, did you have something? I saw you jump in here.
Oh, I actually not yet, but thank you for the opportunity to greet everyone. I'm so glad to see so many new faces, those who have some experience in training and education, and those that are kind of new to this topic. We'll have something for all of you. Feel free to add into the chat your questions or come offline and ask those questions. And that's what we're really here for today with this particular topic.
Welcome. So, as I said, we're going to be working with some foundational pieces of the system of Reiki from the perspective of its Japanese origins. And I could geek out all day on the history of this practice, where it came from, how it migrated to the United States, how it changed into different systems of practice with very different worldviews. We'll touch on a little bit of that, but I promise I won't go down too deep of a rabbit hole. But if you're interested, I'll share it in other ways. But the bottom line is that this system of practice is rooted in a very specific time and place, very specific cultural and spiritual set of traditions, which is Japanese esoteric Buddhism and the indigenous practice of Shinto. Like any spiritual or worldview, those cultural origins matter. They shape how things like healing is understood, things like energy, what is actually happening when we are engaging with these things. And there's a wide range of how we can understand those things. And so we have found it really important in our practice to, as much as we can, as Americans in the 21st century, to understand those origins, to integrate them, to practice from those perspectives, not only because it feels like good integrity to us, but because we found it to be incredibly effective in how we practice the system for ourselves and for and with other people. And so today's topic, as you probably saw when you registered, is kind of one of these foundational perspectives, worldviews, ways of understanding Reiki, coming from the Japanese origins of the system, which is that all Reiki is self-Reiki. That Reiki is a practice that happens from the inside out. And we're going to begin with a little bit of a resonance, as we always do in these classes. Just take a moment for us to really call ourselves here, to turn our attention inward, to connect with why we are here in this conversation, and to begin kind of moving these ideas inside of ourselves. So I'm going to invite you to just take a moment to settle your body wherever you are. If you're driving, then do your best to settle your body while remaining alert. And for those of you watching on the video, on the replay, welcome. We are so glad you are here. In the future, please do go ahead and engage this practice along with us. So allowing your body to settle, just noticing what your body needs to feel well supported, to feel well held. Inviting the muscles of your belly to be soft, which can sometimes take a couple of breaths of invitation. We often hold the muscles of the front of our body tight, constrict the belly, hold it in, protect the soft places beneath. And so in this moment, I'm just going to invite you on your next couple of exhales to invite the muscles of your belly to relax, to allow your body to expand naturally with your breath, to make up more space inside of you, to allow the beautiful structure of your body, the strength of your back, the alignment of your bones to hold you well as you soften the front of your body. Cultivating what Brené Brown has called a soft front and a strong back. And from this physical posture, we can allow our breath to be in our posture for practice, which is that the breath moves freely in and down, the belly expanding with the inhale, so that the breath can move all the way down into the belly. That the diaphragm can move freely to expand your belly, to expand the bottom of your lungs, to bring your breath in and down and low in the body. And you can place a hand on your belly to help notice whether or not your belly is expanding with the inhale, just feeling the gentle rhythm of expansion and contraction as your body and your breath move together. And then with the body and the breath integrated in this way, we can bring our mind into this posture for practice by resting your attention on the sensation of your breath moving in and down. Focusing your attention on the movement of the breath and the sensation of that movement. Calling your attention back from all the places you've spent it today. Drawing your focus to the single motion of the breath as it moves in and down. Drawing your attention down into your low belly. And finding the point just below your belly button and deep into the center of your body. Resting your attention, focusing your mind on this point, this energy center in the low belly known as the hara, the first diamond, the first point on the map of the system of Reiki. Let's just take a couple of breaths, drawing our attention here, resting in this centered place, this very center of our physical body. Allowing yourself to be welcomed home here.
As you're focusing your body and your breath and your mind here at this point, a couple of finger widths below the navel, deep into the center of your body, this energy center, like an acupuncture point inside you. It is also the physical center of gravity of our body. If you are a dancer or do any movement practice, moving meditation, martial arts, that's how we often learn to move from. It's also the energetic center of gravity, the energy center of our body, as Michaela mentioned.
And from this centered place, to which you have been welcomed home, I'm going to invite you to consider these questions, holding them with curiosity and without judgment. Asking yourself, what do I believe about healing and about the source of healing in my life? What do I believe about healing and about the source of healing in my life? Just taking a couple of breaths to sit with that question, not striving for an answer, but simply being with the question and whatever arises. And then on your next breath, considering this second question, what do I believe or know about the system of Reiki and its relationship to healing? What do I believe or know about the system of Reiki and its relationship to healing? There's no right or wrong answer to this question. It's about your relationship with this system at whatever point in that relationship you are in. And then taking 3 more breaths here. Gathering up what you have noticed. And following an exhale back up and out into the spaces around you. And if you have a journal or something to write with, I welcome you to capture anything that may have come up for you, if anything did. And if anyone feels brave or ready, I'd love to hear from a couple of folks what came up for you, either by dropping it in the chat or by coming off mute. Just give you a couple of moments to settle in wherever you want to be in that. And Joe is sending me the wise suggestion to put those questions in the chat. So I will. Give me just a sec. All right, those questions are in the chat if you'd like to capture them. So friends, as you are sitting with that process, and still welcome to share anything that came up for you in the chat or off mute, I just want to share this quote from one of my teachers, Bronwyn Logan, in her book, The Japanese Art of Reiki, that she wrote with Franz Stina. The basic premise of this method, the system of Reiki, is that healing exists within each person, not outside. And therefore, the essence of the teachings is self-practice. The ultimate healing tool is the practitioner's own dedication to healing the self. Another person can never give this depth of healing. The ultimate healing tool is the practitioner's own dedication to healing ourselves. No one else can achieve such a depth of healing for us. And this quote implies a number of things. Firstly, that the source of healing is in fact here. And that it is dedication to practice that brings about any form of transformation that might result from our relationship with the system of Reiki, or any system for that matter. And that this is a relationship, right? It's a relationship with a system that was developed for a specific purpose. And so we want to make a distinction between the word Reiki, which is translated from the Japanese as spiritual energy, and Reiki as a system of practice, which is something that was developed by a particular person in a particular time or place. The word Reiki has existed in Japanese for ever, long, long time, and is related to existing spiritual and cultural beliefs, rooted in, as I said before, esoteric Japanese Buddhism and the indigenous practices of Shinto. And so those practices have a particular perspective, a particular worldview, beginning with the idea that Reiki, spiritual energy, which is the phenomenon in the world that animates us, that connects us, is us, is you. You are Reiki. You have Reiki inside of you. It always has been so. It always has been there. You do not need me or any other teacher to connect you to Reiki because it is what you are. So, what do you need a teacher for? What do you need attunement for? Right? We need a structure, a container to put around our engagement with the system, with the phenomenon of Reiki, so that we can deepen that relationship. Because even though ultimately we are always connected to each other, to the web of life, to energy, we forget because we go through our life in our relative reality with lots and lots of distractions, right? Lots of distractions from outside of ourselves, from inside of ourselves, things that interrupt this natural process of being connected, being resourced by this wider web of life that is animated and connected through the phenomenon of Reiki, of spiritual energy. And so, as a human with a vulnerable body working through a complicated world, we are constantly being distracted from this truth. And that distraction interrupts our process of bringing ourselves into balance, which is what we're designed to do. And so, a system of practice helps us to remember, helps us to reopen that memory that we are essentially always connected, and therefore always resourced, and therefore always able to be healed. And so the system of Reiki was developed with 5 elements and a wide variety of practices inside of those elements that all work together for the same goal, which is to remember our wholeness, remember our connection with the larger web of life, to remember our true self, which lives in a very particular place in our body, which is where we just were in our low belly, and to remember and embody the precepts of this system, which ask us to detach ourselves from fear, detach ourselves from anger, to root ourselves down into gratitude and compassion for ourselves and for others, and to do all of those things diligently. Those are the precepts of the system of Reiki. And so we have a worldview that says we are Reiki, we are energy. That energy animates us and connects us with each other and with all of life. That therefore we are immensely resourced when we are able to focus our attention on that, and that we are constantly being distracted from all of that. And therefore we can support ourselves and each other through a system of practice that helps us remember. That's what Reiki is about. Now, I'm going to make a little bit of a provocative statement here, which is that I cannot actually tell you with any certainty outside of myself, that everything I just said is true. Because all of that comes from a particular worldview, a set of beliefs. I believe it to be true because I've been in the direct experience of it for almost 10 years. And I have a direct experience of contrasting that worldview that I just described with a different worldview that came to us through the Western system of Reiki that's developed in this country and in the West over the last 80 years, that holds those things to be a little bit different, fundamentally different perspective on what I just said. I can contrast those two experiences, and I can see that when I've been living over here in the worldview I just described, that my practice with the system of Reiki has made measurable, deep impacts on my happiness, my stability, my sense of groundedness, my ability to weather chaos and catastrophe in the world and in my own life, my ability to feel spaciousness and possibility, and my ability to feel deeply connected to myself and to everybody else. And that, for me, that has meant an incredibly increased quality of life. And it has for the people that I've worked with as well. So for me, it doesn't matter whether or not everything I just told you is factually accurate, right? I don't have any scientific tools that can tell you with absolute certainty that everything I just said is accurate. But what I do have is many years of direct experience that have positively impacted my life, which helped me to be committed to that worldview, while at the same time allowing it to evolve and expand as I work with the system and as I work with all of you, because all of you bring your experiences, your worldviews, your beliefs into this space, and all of them matter because we get to bring all of that to bear on how we understand healing. Joe.
Uh, Thank you, Michaela, for bringing that out really at the outset, about what Reiki and the system of Reiki actually are about in this view, versus what Michaela and I actually both in our first training in the system of Reiki experienced with the predominant Western Reiki that's actually more available when the focus isn't on these cultural origins and the meaningfulness and the value of the cultural origins. And so from a person very briefly that, was in science and math in my career and education and my work, being involved in training some of the state of California's what people call the super analysts, who are often in our left brain, evaluation of things that have to have data and information and science. And as much as that's really good, what I found in my own life is that science is actually not necessary. Math is not necessary to prove the reality of things that are energetic and spiritual. Quantum physics is getting a lot of attention and neurology about how this stuff works, but it doesn't. As Michaela said, if we didn't know that in our left brain, the experience, that direct embodied experience, is very real and very useful. And so these are some of the perspectives that we bring about Reiki.
So I'd love to pause there and just see if any of that brings up questions or insights or aha moments for any of you. There's a couple of different directions I want to take us from here potentially, and it would be helpful to see what's on your mind, what questions are present for you. If any of that feels not aligned with what you believe and what your perspectives are, I'd love to hear it. And again, you can drop that in chat or you can come off of mute. Gives me a chance to have some more tea. Okay. Leslie, you love the statement that we are Reiki. It sums it up so nicely. Yeah. Yeah. Does that statement feel like a new idea to anybody? The idea that it's already what you are? Or does that feel resonant for folks? I ask because, and again, continue to drop your comments in the chat as I move us forward. When I first was introduced to Reiki about 10 years ago, and trained with my first teacher, worked with her for about 3 years, had a really amazing experience, really took the practice into my life quite thoroughly. Very grateful for her. And some of the ways in which I was taught to understand Reiki were very different than what I just described to you. I learned that Reiki was universal energy that is out there in the world, out there in the universe. That in order to be able to access that energy, I need to be attuned by a teacher who was attuned by a teacher who was attuned by a teacher back to the founder of the system, Mikao Usui. And that once I was attuned to the different levels, the 3 levels of Reiki, then I had access to it, that I was able to work with it. I was able to channel it from outside of myself, through my body, through my hands, to share with other people or with myself. And that becoming a Reiki practitioner meant becoming a channel, becoming a siphon for energy that's outside of myself to concentrate it, to bring it through myself and through my hands into another person. And that the purpose of the system of Reiki was that act, was that activity of channeling energy from outside of myself into another person, or possibly myself. Self practice was always a little bit of a side note. Like, it's also good to do this for yourself, but why we're here is to learn how to do it for other people. And that all of those things were quite separate. The energy outside of me was quite separate from me. I was quite separate from this other person, and that the act of channeling Reiki through me and to them was the healing act. And that was a really interesting thing to learn. And I practiced with that perspective, that, understanding of what was happening for quite some time. Just pausing to say that Himali agrees with Leslie. The idea, it's an idea that the iterations of which I have grown up around, but it's hard to remember that. Same goes for the idea that healing is within us. Yeah. Yeah. Because we have so many conflicting messages about what's actually happening. And as I said, um, you know, we really make our own choices about what we believe is happening. Any belief system is going to come from a particular culture, a particular set of experiences, a set of values, a set of experiences with the world, whether or not we have access to information from other places. And when we realize that we have a bias about what we believe about anything, but the system of Reiki in this instance, when I can acknowledge I have a bias that comes from my lived experience, then we can make choices about where we want to put our attention. And that's what happened to me after several years of working with the Western form of Reiki. It started to feel out of alignment. And I started to have questions about what was actually happening. And I became very aware that I hadn't been given any education about the origins of the system. What did the founder of the system believe about Reiki? Why were all of these elements what they were? And what was Japanese about it? Right? I learned that it was Japanese, but I wasn't learning why and in what way and what that meant culturally. And when I started learning those things, not only did I feel better aligned and more integrity with the system, being a white American in the 2020s, practicing this system that is from Japan. The system itself developed in the late early 1900s, but from long existing traditions. Japanese Buddhism goes back to the 6th century, and the Shinto indigenous practice is as old as the Japanese people. And so I felt much more integrity. But as I said before, the effectiveness of the system and how it operates in my life skyrocketed at that point. And this concept that we are all Reiki, that healing is inside of us, that all Reiki is self Reiki. And I'm going to circle back around to what that means when we're working with another person, right? Because if all Reiki is self Reiki, how do we share Reiki with another person? We'll circle back to that. And that what we're doing is looking inside of ourselves rather than outside of ourselves for that source of healing and connection. That shift in mindset and that choice to believe that way of thinking over the way of thinking that I had originally learned made a profound difference for me. And so I became very dedicated to it. I became very curious about it. It became very aligned with aspects of my own cultural lineage, which runs through Celtic roots in Scotland and Ireland. Many, many, many connections between those European indigenous perspectives and the Shinto perspective about the connection between us as a living being and the rest of the web of life. It all became more alive for me. And so I haven't looked back. That's what I've been doing ever since. Let's see, there was another chat that I missed.
Yeah, while Michaela's looking at the chats, Brenda, thank you for sharing that about what your idea of Reiki is in your experience. And then Leslie, really good point that I know we may come back to here about the need to protect ourselves from energy. And that's actually a popular question about protection. And we'll circle back to that. Go ahead, Michaela.
Yeah, I'm just seeing the question now. Is there any concern for protecting one's own energy from this perspective? Yeah. As Joe said, this is a question that it matters a lot because it's a point of it's a sticky point between these two perspectives that I'm sharing, right? Because one of the reasons that Western Reiki has come to have this view that we are a channel, we're bringing energy from outside of ourselves through ourselves into another person. If that is so, then we do need to, and this is how I learned originally, we need to protect ourselves from exchanging energy with that person. We're not giving them our energy, we're not taking on their energy. We want to be a clean channel for the energy coming from outside of ourselves through to them. And then we want to scrub all of that up and clean all of that up when we're done with the session and kind of disconnect from them. And inside of all of that is this worldview, this belief, this perspective of separateness. That I am separate from you, my energy is separate from your energy. Universal energy, Reiki, is separate from both of us, and we need to keep all of that clear and separate and scrubbed. Now, there are real life reasons why it would be important to think that way. Many of us have had experiences of being around another person whose vibe, energy, emotional state of being has negatively impacted us, right? And we want to create that sense of separation and separateness. That's appropriate in the relative reality of our day to day when we are flawed humans that have hurts that can impact how we show up with each other. And so I mentioned earlier, and this is it's a multi-layered question. And so we're going to kind of deal with some surface layers at this point, but happy to continue that conversation after this class if you're interested. But I mentioned earlier this difference between relative reality, our day-to-day interactions with each other, and ultimate reality, which is kind of what spiritual systems are inviting us to perceive and to look from. So from this perspective, the ultimate reality is that we are all connected. It's one ocean, right? All water is the same water. It's all connected to each other. All of life is the same life. We are all connected to each other. All energy is the same energy. It's all connected to each other. So there is no universal energy, my personal energy, your personal energy, that all needs to be kept separate in its own discrete packages and only shared in limited ways. Different way of thinking about it. So if we are all connected and all energy is the same, then there's no need for me to protect myself from you or you to protect yourself from me on the level of energy. On the level of relationship in the day-to-day life that we have with each other, we want to respect boundaries, maintain our personal boundaries. There are people that we may not want to be around, that might not be good to be around, or we might want to limit our interactions, or we might want to state boundaries, right? That's our relative reality. And we can hold that to be true, while at the same time holding to be true that we are also all connected. So when I am in my practice of Reiki, the practice is remembering. The practice is remembering the ultimate reality that we're all connected and that all of our resources to be grounded, to feel deeply rooted in the earth, to feel all of the resources of life that come through the earth, to feel wide open and spacious and this wide open pool of possibility that comes from the spaces above and around us, and to feel ultimately deeply and compassionately connected to myself and all others, that is what I am focusing on when I'm in my practice. And as I do that, as I bring my attention to that, as I allow my body to relax into that, allow my nervous system to relax into that and to feel nourished and resilient, as I feel more strong in myself and therefore less buffeted and pushed around and impacted by all of the chaos that can happen around us, by other people's beliefs and perspectives and all of the bullshit that comes at us on a daily basis, when I can feel really strong in my center, then I move through the world differently. I show up with you differently. I show up in conflict differently. I show up in joyful moments differently. And that difference impacts the people that I'm around. That is how Reiki is shared from one person to another. I'm not channeling energy to you. I am being as strong as I can in those perspectives that I just named of being deeply rooted, wide open and spacious, compassionately connected. And because we are connected, because we have empathy, because our body has mirror neurons wherein our heart rate mirrors each other, our breathing rate mirrors each other, you pick that up from me. Your body goes, your system, your mind, your body, your heart goes, oh, that's right. I remember. I can be that way too. I am Reiki also. And then your system starts doing what your system knows to do, which is to find that place of balance and wholeness. It becomes this reverberated feedback loop, right? When one element in our network of life shifts into more wholeness and stability, then the other elements around it begin to shift, right? Does that make sense? That distinction of how Reiki begins here, all Reiki is self Reiki. It begins with my own state of mind, my own relationship to energy and to life, my remembering all of those things, and then that ripples out to you. Does that make sense? I'm seeing some nodding,
Yeah.
seeing a chat that I missed.
Yeah, as Michaela's looking at that chat, I wanted to add that, as I mentioned earlier, we don't really need modern neuroscience and quantum physics to prove things that are, especially when those perspectives, especially me as a science and math person, is like, it's about data. It's about, can I touch it? Can I repeat it? But yet, there's a lot of information from a variety of learnings and perspectives that support what the kinds of things that Michaela said about the interconnection of energies of life. That, like, for example, if I'm energy and light is a form of energy that can be experienced, seen, and my light is the same as my water, a part of all the water, the ocean, every drop of water, the air, all the air everywhere, the light, all the light anywhere, or heat, then that helps an understanding, at least in my mind, my head, of my light and your light are light, and we're connected, we're related. Okay, so that's a simple way of understanding that. So the hidden life of trees, or the secret life of trees, some people think, where the trees connect with each other through maybe the root system, if that's the way we can see it. And when one tree is hurting, the other trees come around and support it. And what has been learned about that? When a plant gets damaged by some experience, the other plants around it can note that and notice that. Those are examples that are being measurable today about the interconnection of all life. Yeah, so there's a lot to back that up.
And I love that you bring in trees and roots and ground because, as I mentioned when we did our opening resonance, there is a map. There's an energetic map for the system of Reiki. It exists inside of our bodies and it exists out in the world. And part of the framework that we work with, the worldview that we work with, is this symmetry between our own body, our own earth, and the world around us. And we're looking to nature as our teacher to show us, to demonstrate how this all works. And that map begins in the belly and it begins in the earth. And it begins with the connection between the energy center in our belly and the earth. And we work with that sense of rootedness, that sense of groundedness first and foremost, because we want to keep our feet strongly on the ground before we begin to look up and out. That's another, we did a class on that actually. Another conversation, but wanted to just kind of bring that in there. And then I wanted to share what Natalia put in the chat, that this message that just came through for you. We need to connect to the source within us so that we can connect to the source outside of our bodies, to which we open up and connect to universal energy and manifest this healing and energy into the physical realm. And I think that there's a lot inside of that that is resonant with what I'm saying. And The foundational practice for the system of Reiki, you mentioned there are 5 elements in the system. That's precepts, breathwork and meditation, symbols and mantras, hands-on healing, and Reiju, or initiation. And inside of each of those elements, there are multiple practices. And the foundational practice for all of them is a practice called Joshin Kokyu-ho. And we did the very beginning of it in our opening resonance, settling our body, our mind, our breath into this unified posture for practice, and then bringing our attention down into the belly. That's how we start. From there, we begin to imagine this expansion of that core inside of ourself, like light expanding in all directions. Very much like what you described, finding that source of the divine inside of ourself. And I'll refine the language here, not connecting that source with the source outside of ourself, but remembering that that connection is always and already present, right? Just want to make that distinction, right? If we're needing to connect our inside to the sources outside, then that implies that we're disconnected. Just like if I have to channel Reiki energy to you and then disconnect from you when we're done, that implies that we're disconnected and we need something outside of ourselves to connect us. It's a very common, normal way of thinking about things from a Western view. We're steeped in it. It's everywhere that we look. It's very, very challenging to shift that mindset. It took me years. It's ongoing. I'm not going to say I am now one with the universe. That would mean I am enlightened. I am a Buddha. I am not. Okay. But that's the journey that we're on. And so just even shifting the language that we use, which is flawed and imperfect. All language is flawed and imperfect, particularly when we're translating from a very fluid, poetic, metaphoric, spiraling language like Japanese into a very linear, very concrete, very detail focused language like English. We lose a lot in that translation. So language is clunky here. But if we just shift even from connecting to that source of the divine inside of ourselves, rather than connecting it to outside of ourselves, connect inside and then remember that we are already connected, that connection is always present and always has been. There's a relaxation that happens in our nervous system. There's no work that we have to do. There's no effort that we have to put in to connect, to become resourced. It's already there, right? The work is in our day-to-day, in our relationships, and how we navigate the world and the choices that we make. The effort, the work is not in this connection. That is our birthright. It is who we are. It is what we are. It's what it means to be alive, is what I believe from this perspective, right? So I'm inviting you to try that on. I'm inviting you to try on the perspective that you are Reiki, you always have been, whether or not you've been attuned to it from a teacher. That the way that we develop mastery with this practice is through practice, not through attunement. And that practice is simple, it's accessible, it's elegant, but it's not necessarily easy because it does require diligence. And diligence is something I know I struggle with. Many of us do, right? I heard somebody.
As I'm listening to what you're sharing, Michaela, and again, we want to be sure to invite you to put in the chat or come off mute and bring your questions, your thoughts about some of this in the time we have. But it reminds me of something Michaela said earlier about the cultural roots of Reiki and the system of Reiki, and why Shinto as an indigenous practice for the Japanese and pre-Japanese people, and why Japanese esoteric Buddhism, of all the various schools and flavors of Buddhism, fit into the system of Reiki. And questions that sometimes come up like, is this a spiritual and an energy practice? Yes, we're hearing that. And what does that mean? Is this a religious practice? Sometimes we, especially in the West, connect religion and spirituality together from our traditions. Yes, but why is this important? I am not a Buddhist. My Chinese American background brings me culturally to a connection with some of these ideas. But Macau Usui did something very fascinating with a simple system that, as Michaela said, may not be easy. And if we get a little bit into our left brain head about it all and all the information, it can start to get like sounds complex and sounds kind of deep and heavy, because there is breadth and depth to any practice that can have the effects of more contentment, more peace, more joy in our day-to-day complexity of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what Usui did was to distill all of those centuries of tradition into an accessible, elegant practice, which all centers on what can be summarized in a single purpose, which is to live as an embodiment of the precepts. That we live our lives moment by moment, unattached to fear and anger, because fear pulls us into the future and anger pulls us back into the past. To root into a sensation of deep gratitude for what is present, deep and abiding compassion for ourselves and for all others, and to do these things diligently in our life. That is literally the definition of enlightenment from the perspective of the system of Reiki. It is the distillation of the Eightfold Path of Buddhism put into a secular and accessible form. All the other aspects of the system, from the inside out, are designed to help us to do that. Because it's easy to say, don't be attached to your anger when something's really pissing you off. Don't be attached to your fear when there are terrifying things happening out in the world. Be grateful for what you have when you're experiencing deep loss and lack and suffering. Be compassionate with yourself when you're feeling self loathing. Be compassionate for other people when people have been absolute shits to you. That is not easy. It's easy to say, it's not easy to do. And so we have this simple, accessible system of practice that helps us live that in our life. And when we do, the experience, the sensation in our body, mind, and heart is of healing, which is why healing becomes the focus point for many of us in terms of what is the system of Reiki about. And I think that's a very fair way to look at it. But what I want to suggest is that what healing means is to live our life unattached to fear and to anger, to be deeply grateful, to be deeply compassionate, and to do all of that diligently every day. So we are at the end of our time for today. I saw some requests about recordings. And so just to clarify, absolutely yes, the recording of this session will go out to all of you. I will also include in there a playlist from my YouTube channel that goes over the 5 elements of the system in more detail, and kind of how they fit together. I'm in the middle of recording that series, and so the playlist will have the first 3 or 4 videos, and then if you subscribe to the channel or if you check back, you'll see the rest of them come out. That channel has just a ton of kind of short form teaching videos about a lot of these topics and just insights from the journey. It'll also have information on how you can stay in touch with us, how you can continue working with us. As I mentioned, our next Reiki 1 class begins January 15th. That can be taken as a standalone class or as part of a deeper dive that we take people through over the course of a full year. There'll be information available about that. And if you want to have a chat about anything that we've talked about today, there will also be a link to schedule a phone call if you are interested in following up. So I'm seeing the thank yous, the wonderfuls. Oh, I'm so glad it's resonating with all of you. I absolutely love these conversations. They are my favorite. And so I look forward to being with all of you again. We offer this free class once a month, every first Wednesday of the month. Next month, we will be talking about the art of ritual, the role of ritual in the system of Reiki in our daily lives, and how we can increase our ability to create spontaneous ritual in our life. So come on back for that. And I love you. Thank you for being here. Aw, thank you, Tiffany. Aw, that's so
Thanks,
sweet.
everyone. So many questions that may not have gotten to be addressed in this short session today. Please follow where Michaela's information is about Heartscapes, how you found this class, where you can get, access to us for any other questions that maybe you didn't get a chance to answer. So good to meet you again today. Happy New Year to everyone. Love to all.
Bye.